We've been looking at the life of Christ and who Jesus is and his uniqueness and the various things in his life that shows that he was indeed unique. And when you look at just his life, period, it truly is unique in itself. We take notice of a number of things that people have to say concerning Christ and the influence of his life upon the lives of others. I'm going to be looking at two different areas this morning. Number one, I'll be looking at the sinless Savior. No man can say that except Jesus Christ. Furthermore, we'll be taking notice that he is the perfect practitioner of everything that he preached. No man can say that as well. No preacher. I turned my attention, first of all, to the renowned religious historian Philip Schaff, and he wrote, "In vain do we look through the entire biography of Jesus for a single stain or the slightest shadow of his moral character. There never lived a man more harmless being on earth. He injured nobody. He took advantage of nobody. He never wrote an improper word. He never committed a wrong action. That is unique." Bernard Ram commented in a similar vein when he stated concerning Christ, "There he stands, sinless. Whatever men may claim for being great, this one thing they cannot. They may be brilliant or strong, fast or clever, creative or inspired, but not sinless. Sinless perfection and perfect sinlessness is what we would expect of God incarnate in flesh. The hypothesis and the facts concur. He ought to be, he was. Jesus Christ is the greatest person who ever lived. His moral character, his teaching, his influence upon history demonstrate that he indeed is God. Through 2,000 years of advancement in education, technology, philosophy, medicine, and science, mankind has never produced a person who is worthy to be compared to Jesus. A number of times you will have folks who will compare themselves with others. They may be better. Sometimes they compare themselves with themselves, and they can't be better in that case. But everybody who desires to compare themselves to Jesus Christ will always fall short. I now turn my attention to 1 Peter chapter 1. Peter says, "Knowing that you were redeemed, not with corruptible things, with silver and gold from your vain manner of life, handed down from your fathers, but with precious blood as of a lamb without spot and without blemish, even the blood of Christ." And so obviously we recognize that Jesus is this one who is without spot and without blemish. So let us turn and notice the passages that would proclaim that Jesus is a sinless Savior. I will turn my attention first of all into the New Testament, where we hear of the politicians who would proclaim what they thought of Christ. Politicians today, however, as you recognize, did not invent lawfare. All during Jesus' 3-year ministry, he faced the use of legal action designed to stop his preaching and movement. So we see that in his life, we see the things that are going on today. He faced and he overcame. In Luke chapter 23, verse 4, we start with this verse for the whole chapter. And we recognize that Pilate, he would say unto the chief priest and to the multitudes, as Jesus is standing there before them, beaten to a pulp, "I find no fault in this man." Look at verse 14 and 15. Pilate again would say, "You brought unto me this man as one that perverteth the people, and behold, I have examined him, found no fault in this man touching those things wherein you accused him. No, nor yet Herod, for he sent him back unto me, and behold, Nothing worthy of death hath been done by him. So here you have Herod and you have Pilate, and both of these men are proclaiming to those multitudes, there is no fault in this man. Look now at verse 21 and 22. The people shouted and said, crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate said unto them the third time, why? What evil hath the man done? Pilate saw what was wrong. Pilate saw that among those people, as they were crying, crucify him, that they had agitators among them that were evil. Just because you are sinless doesn't people who see you are sinless. Just because you are sinless doesn't mean you don't have agitators and people that desire to take your life. That was what was going on. And so we turn our attention from the politicians to the people and the opposition that Jesus was constantly having to face. Less than 6 months after these people said, crucify him, Jesus also said this, John 8:46. Which of you convicteth me of sin? If I say truth, why do you not believe me? So he's standing before them 6 months before his crucifixion. Which one of you convicteth me of sin? Which one of you exposes me to be guilty? Which one of you shows me to be guilty of sin? Which one can convince with solid, compelling evidence to expose that I'm wrong and incorrect? I speak the truth, said the Lord. Now turn back to John chapter 7, this same group of people, the Jews in Jerusalem. John 7:16. Jesus therefore said, my teaching is not my own, but his that sent me. If any man willeth to do his will, he shall know the teaching, whether it is of God or whether I speak from myself. Verse 18. He that speaketh from himself seeketh his own glory, but he that seeketh the glory of him that sent him, the same is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. So Jesus lets it know, look, you can determine, am I seeking my own glory in this? He was not. A number of folks are amazed that Jesus did not claim himself to be the Son of God. By the way, he did. But they make a big issue out of that. Jesus never said he was God. Yes, he did. But he didn't go around hanging it on everybody's ears. We take notice that others would proclaim Jesus as the sinless one. He had a personal friend. That personal friend was named Judas. Notice in Matthew 27:3 and 4. Now, Judas was known to be a thief. He stole the money that was used for honorable, compassionate, merciful things. But listen, after he betrayed the Lord, then Judas, who betrayed Jesus, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priest and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I betrayed innocent blood. They said, what's that to us? We don't care. We turn our attention from the one friend to 12 friends. These 12 personal friends of Jesus gave their life, sacrificed everything that was precious in life in order to tell people the truth about Christ, about what happened, about who he was. We turn our attention, first of all, to the Apostle John, 1 John 3, verse 5. John will let it be known in 1 John 3:5. You know that he was manifested to take away sin. Then watch this. In him, there is no sin. It's amazing what one particular writer, Vincent, said about this. Quote, literally, in him, sin is not. He is essentially and forever without sin. That's the way John the Apostle put it. Looking at 1 Peter chapter 2, 21, we have the Apostle Peter say, "For hereunto were you called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, that you should follow his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth, who when he was reviled, reviled not again, when he suffered, threatened not, but committed himself to him that judge righteously." So Peter lets it be known, he sinned not. And watch this. He left us an example. Now, right here, I would like to know from Cheery, she's not with us today, but I'd like to know from Cheery if she ever taught at the time in which maybe they would place the ABCs at the ceiling in the room of third graders, second graders, fourth graders. And you would have a capital A and you would have a small a. Well, whenever we practiced at our desk, we would follow the example. That's what's the picture given here. Jesus is the example. Here you have the example, Christ. And when in your life, you write it down in your life the way that you see it, you copy it the way that Jesus left it. You can recognize and understand he is the perfect example because he's sinless. Turning our attention to the Apostle Paul, who was born out of due season, 1 Corinthians 15, but still an apostle of the Lord. He said, "For we have not a high priest that cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but one that hath been in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin." John says no sin. Peter said no sin. Paul said no sin. He was indeed the sinless one. Now we turn our attention to the second point that we had in mind, and that is that Jesus was a perfect practitioner of everything that he preached. Oh, that all preachers would be that way. Though the attitude and action of the world was and is, you only go around once in life, grab all the gusto you can. Jesus taught and practiced the principle of denying oneself. Matthew 16:24. Then said Jesus unto the disciples, "If any man would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross," Mark says, daily, "and follow me." In Luke 9:58, Luke, "The foxes have holes, the birds of the heavens have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head." He doesn't have any place to lay his head. He owns it all. He could have gotten a chair from another planet. He could have gotten a bed from another world. But instead, he came to this earth, having nothing, taking nothing, but sacrificing all. Though the attitude and action of the world was and is, look out for number one. Jesus taught and practiced the principle of loving others. In Matthew 22:39, what is the greatest commandment of all? Jesus said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God, and him shalt thou serve." And the second is like unto that, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." So we are to love our neighbor. By the way, that's from the Old Testament. That's from the Old Testament. Let's change the word love to its definition: goodwill. We need to will good to our neighbor. We need to will good to ourselves as well, and let God define what the good is. Sometimes one neighbor will give strong drink to another neighbor. That's not goodwill. Perfect practitioner of everything that he preached. Though the attitude and action of the world was and is winning is everything, Jesus taught and practiced the principle of dying for others. Matthew 16:25-26. For whosoever shall save his life shall lose it. Whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what shall a man be profited if he gain the whole world and forfeit his life? What shall a man give in exchange for his life? This is what Jesus taught. The Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. And thus the Apostle Paul would conclude the lesson for us by letting it be known, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I that liveth, but Christ liveth in me. The last thing I want us to hear is the influence of Jesus' life and his teaching. And it goes like this. Again, Philip Schaff, the historian, said, he described the overwhelming influence which Jesus had on subsequent history and the culture of the world. He said, this Jesus of Nazareth without money, alms, conquered more millions than Alexander, Caesar, Muhammad, or Napoleon. Without science, he shed more light on things human and divine than all of the philosophers and scholars combined. Without the eloquence of schools, he spoke such words of life as were never spoken before and since, and produced effects which lie beyond the reach of orator or poet. Without writing a single line, he set more pens in motion and furnished themes for more sermons, orientations, discussions, learned volumes, works of art, songs of praise than the whole army of men of ancient and modern times. This is the Savior that we serve. This Savior that we serve says that you can be sinless, not because of what you've done, but because Christ died for you and you have reached his blood by being baptized as a penitent believer into him and arising out of the watery grave of baptism.